Hey MCARBO brother, I'm Chris Nelson, president at MCARBO, and really excited to introduce the Mossberg 500 835 trigger spring kit for your Mossberg shotguns. It'll also work for the Maverick 88 and a wide variety of other models we'll discuss here in a second. It's a two-spring custom designed kit giving you about a 50% trigger pull reduction, a fantastic upgrade. We've had this kit for a while and it's got a lot of great feedback and reviews. We're really excited about it. So we've even created a new installation tool to help in the process. So it's a custom designed tool, it'll speed up the installation process. Right now it's about a 20 to 30 minute installation, but we expect it to be much faster with the new installation tool. Now we've got a no hassle 100% lifetime guarantee. Doesn't matter if you don't get the performance for whatever reason, or if you don't get any sort of results that you expected, just send it back. We'll give you another one, or we'll give you your money back. But we're very confident in this kit and very proud of it, and the feedback speaks for itself. Now, we're a veteran-owned and operated company. We give back to military foundations that humbly support Gold Star families and veterans. We're very proud of that, and we're very proud of the MCARBO Brotherhood, a community of veterans, police officers, and Second Amendment patriots like yourself. Jump on over to Facebook if you're not already a part of the private group. There's a lot of great discussion going on in there. A lot of great guys like yourselves. All right, let's jump on over to the tabletop, put the spring kit in. Let's go ahead and check our shotguns together, make sure they're clear. Check the chamber, check the bolt face, check the magazine tube. The shotgun's clear. Now let's see what kind of factory trigger pull we're starting with. 6 pounds, 6 ounces. Now let's take one more to confirm. 6 pounds, 5.5 ounces. Parts and tools needed for this build: the Mossberg 500 835 trigger spring kit by MCARBO, which is also compatible with the Mossberg 505, 510, 535, 590, and the Maverick 88 shotgun. It also works with all gauges: 12 gauge, 16 gauge, 20 gauge, 28 gauge, but it will not work with the 410 bore. You also need the Mossberg 500 835 assembly tool, 1/8 inch punch, hammer, flathead screwdriver, block of wood with a hole in it. And as always, guys, make sure you're wearing iPro. So let's begin the installation by orienting our shotguns like so. Ejection port side facing up. We've got the trigger assembly pin oriented over the hole in the block of wood. We'll take our 1/8 inch punch, go ahead and tap out that trigger assembly pin. Okay, go ahead and flip the shotgun upright, put your pin aside and block of wood aside. Now we're going to go ahead and pull up and out on the trigger assembly. All right, we'll go ahead and set the trigger assembly aside for a second. Here you can see the cartridge interrupter on the ejection port side just fell out, and that's natural, it will. All right, we tell the difference because it's got a narrow pointed tip on the end. All right, we'll set the cartridge interrupter aside. Now the cartridge stop, which is on the non-ejection port side, we'll go ahead and pull that out. Okay, and you can tell the difference because it's got a wider, flatter tip. All right, we'll go ahead and set that aside. Now we'll set our shotgun aside. We'll focus on the trigger assembly. Let's go over this trigger assembly real fast. So you've got your action lock lever here. You've got your connector here. For the Mossberg 500 835, this is what interacts with the tang safety on your shotgun. So it's very important that you have this sloping angle towards the rear of the trigger assembly. You can see on the tip here how it's a bit of a sloping angle downward towards the rear of the trigger assembly. It's very important we put it back in this way. Now, if you've got a Maverick 88, you will not have this connector. You're going to have a cross bolt safety on your trigger guard, so you won't have to worry about messing with the connector. Now, the rest of it, we've got the hammer here, and this is our disconnector. And if you look closely, you'll see there's part of your sear right there. So let's just go ahead and get a good look at it. You can see the disconnector pushing on the sear. So we pull the trigger, and it releases the hammer. Now make sure it's all the way released. We want to get all the tension we can off of this hammer spring back here. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to push out this trigger hinge pin here and this hammer spring pin back here. But you'll notice on the hammer spring pin, it's got a deformed end, and it's actually a tapered pin. So it's very important that you don't push this end through. We're actually going to push through the smooth end. Now we need to remove the hammer spring pin. What we'll do is we'll take our actual assembly tool, we'll bypass that pin because it's got the custom cut dimensions to do that, put pressure on the hammer spring and make removing this pin effortless. So we'll go ahead and position our tool like so. Remember, we're pushing on the actual smooth end of the pin, right? All right, position it like this, grab your punch, 1/8 inch punch, push through on the smooth end of the pin. There we go. All right, it's out. Now I'm going to pull the punch out. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the assembly tool. And here's the hammer spring with the hammer plunger on it on the end here. Now the hammer guide right here. Okay, set all that aside. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the trigger hinge pin. So what we'll do is we'll grab our block of wood here. Okay, we're going to actually keep pressure on the top of this trigger here. and grab our 1/8 inch punch, and we're going to push through on that hinge pin. Okay, hinge pin's out, keeping pressure on the trigger here. We don't want everything to go flying. Set the hinge pin aside. Now we're going to slowly release the trigger, okay? And you can see the connector coming up and out like so. You can see that trigger return spring inside there. So we're going to release everything slowly. All right, remove the connector. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull the disconnector arm off of the trigger. We'll go ahead and pull up on the trigger. All right, and there's the trigger return spring. Okay. Now we also had a pin come loose up here on the hammer. All right, didn't pop all the way out, but be mindful of the other pins in the assembly. Don't let them fall out or pop out on you. And now we'll go ahead and remove the disconnector right here. So now we've got everything completely disassembled to the point that we need to take it to. All right, let's go ahead and put our MCARBO trigger spring kit in. These are all the pieces you should have laid out in front of you for your trigger assembly. So you've got the trigger assembly itself, you've got your hammer plunger, you've got your hammer guide, you've got your hammer spring pin, you've got your hammer spring, you've got your disconnector, you've got your trigger return spring, you've got your trigger, you've got your trigger hinge pin, and you've got your connector. If you've got the Maverick 88, you won't have the connector. Now let's go ahead and open up our Mossberg 500-835 trigger spring kit by MCARBO, and we'll compare these springs with the factory springs. All right, you can see we've got a replacement hammer spring and a replacement trigger return spring here. Okay, that's the MCARBO springs. Now here's the factory trigger return spring. You can see how those vary. Okay, and now here's the factory hammer spring. You can see how the factory hammer spring is a little bit shorter. The MCARBO spring is a little bit longer. So something to keep in mind there. Okay. Now let's go ahead and put these springs in. So now we're going to put our trigger assembly back together. These are the parts we're going to concern ourselves with. And now we're going to grab our trigger and MCARBO trigger return spring and drop that spring into the back of the trigger here, that little recessed pocket. So now it's staged and ready. Just want to point out too, this little recessed shallow pocket is where the disconnector tab is going to insert into. So go ahead and drop our trigger. Now we'll go ahead and put the disconnector in. Now we want to put it in like so. This little tab here will be touching and engaging with the sear up front, and this cutout here will be clearance for this pin. So go ahead and drop the disconnector in place. You can see how the disconnector is touching the sear there, right? And then see that disconnector spring right here. So we'll take our flathead screwdriver, push forward on that spring, and then get enough leverage to be able to drop our disconnector in place. Okay, so the disconnector, it's got enough tension on it. Now we'll go ahead and grab our trigger and we'll slowly drop that into place. Push in on that trigger return spring a little bit. It also helps if you got your assembly tool and you just use that to kind of push it forward. Right, there we go. Get your disconnector to locate on the trigger. Okay, hold it in place. We have to get one more part in before we go further. Connector, make sure it is sloping like it is here towards the rear of the trigger assembly. It's downward sloping. All right, so go ahead and get that onto the trigger and in the channel, like so. Now we're going to drop everything simultaneously. Now take your assembly tool, push that inside of this hole because the spring is going to need to compress, the trigger return spring. All right, there we go. It's all in place. Good. All right. So you can see the trigger return spring right here. So if you have to, you can take your punch and somewhat manipulate it and get it straight. Make sure it's nice and straight and even. Now, once it's straight and even, go ahead and push back on it so you can get the holes lined up for that trigger hinge pin. Go ahead and drop that hinge pin right into place. All right, awesome. Look at that. Good to go. Now let's put the rest of our trigger assembly back together. So we'll pull on the trigger, pull the hammer forward, okay? You'll notice there's two pins, a hinge pin here on the bottom and then a locating pin here on the top. We want that top pin, all right? That's important. So we're gonna take our hammer guide and it's gonna locate on that top pin like so. And that little cutout needs to be facing down. This cutout here up front, that's clearance for that hinge pin. So we'll drop it right in like so, okay? And you can either shake it all the way forward or if you've got a magnetic screwdriver, that'll help because you can grab it, place it easily up there on that actual locating pin. So the top pin is where it locates. Perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and grab hammer plunger and hammer spring. Insert the plunger into the hammer spring. This is the MCARBO hammer spring. Insert the plunger in first. I want it to locate on that guide. Go ahead and grab your block of wood because that'll give you enough offset for that hammer to stay forward like it is, okay? Then we're going to take our tapered pin. Remember, we want the smooth end to go in. And you can see how it is wider on that tapered notched end. So we definitely don't want to push that in through. So take your smooth end, right, and insert that just barely into the trigger assembly. Now we're going to grab our assembly tool. You just want to keep that pin just barely into the hole there. We don't want it to cause interference. Take our assembly tool, actually push down on the spring. All right, you want the notch channel facing the pin, and that's what's going to actually allow us to push the pin in just like that, right through the notch and through the other side. Look at that, good to go. All right, so it's all back together, and if it's sticking out a little bit on that tapered end, you can grab your punch and give it a little tap. Okay, look at that, nice. Oh, we're golden now. Hammer functions, it locks and releases. Okay, perfect. Make sure none of these pins are sticking out or about to fall out. Just push them in, just to double check. Awesome, and that feels good too. Nice. All right, let's go ahead and put this back in. Now go ahead and grab your shotgun and turn it upright. Before we insert the trigger assembly, we've got to insert the cartridge interrupter and the cartridge stop. Now this is the cartridge interrupter here with the more narrow pointed end. Go ahead and insert that onto the ejection port side. Drops right in and fits into that little hole here. Now grab your cartridge stop. It's the more wider, fatter tip here. All right, and go ahead and insert that into the non-ejection port side. Now grab your trigger assembly, make sure the hammer's locked. Go ahead and drop that right in. It'll go forward and then down. All right, go ahead and put some pressure on that cartridge interrupter and cartridge stop. All right, once your trigger assembly is in flush, go ahead and take your trigger assembly pin, drop that right in. Take your hammer, tap it the rest of the way in. Good to go. Now that our shotguns are back together, let's go ahead and perform a quick function check. Place it on safe, pull the trigger, nothing. Place it on fire, pull the trigger, beautiful. All right, let's see what kind of trigger pull we got now. 3 pounds, 15.8 ounces. Let's take one more to confirm. 3 pounds, 13.5 ounces. Well, there you have it, guys. From 6.5 pounds down to 3 3/4 pounds. Can't beat that. For a 20-30 minute installation, quick drop-in kit, fantastic upgrade for your Mossberg 500 or your 835 shotgun. Now, if you remember in an earlier video, we did have a trigger pull reading start to finish on the Mossberg 835, and that was a 44% trigger pull reduction. This on the Mossberg 500 was a 42% trigger pull reduction. So nearly a 50% trigger pull reduction, not quite, but almost, and that's a fantastic upgrade for a quick little drop-in kit. Now the other caveat to this is that prototype installation tool was in fact a prototype. The actual tool that you'll be receiving is a machine cut, professionally done installation tool. So I just want to point that out quickly. This was a quick little demo to see if it actually worked well for the practical purposes that we're using it for, which I'm excited about. It did improve the speed of the installation and was a fantastic component to the process. So I just want to show you how we get to that actual percentage reduction. So we started with the 6.5 pound trigger pull to start with for the Mossberg 500, and then a 3 3/4 pound trigger pull when we finished. So that was about a 2 3/4 pound reduction divided by the original 6.5 pounds, giving us a 42% reduction in trigger pull, which is fantastic. Not quite 50, but nearly 50% for a drop-in kit, 20-30 minutes, can't beat it. Now let's talk about the 835. So if you remember from our earlier video, the original, this is the Mossberg 835 that we first did the installation on, and we had an 8.5 pound trigger pull that we reduced down to a 4 3/4 pound trigger pull. A fantastic reduction. This is my original Mossberg shotgun I've had for 11 years. So it's a fantastic upgrade. I'm going to show you the quick math breakdown on how we got to that, but a 44% trigger pull reduction on the Mossberg 835. As you know, no two trigger pulls are ever alike, so everything varies. Let's go ahead and run through the math real quick. So just like the math on the 500, here's the 835. So we started with 8.5 pound trigger pull that we dropped to a 4 3/4 pound trigger pull, giving us a 3.75 trigger pull reduction divided by the original 8.5 pounds giving us an overall 44% trigger pull reduction. Now that's the most significant thing to pay attention to, is that percentage. So on the Mossberg 500, we had a 42% trigger pull reduction. On the 835, we had a 44% trigger pull reduction. I'm really happy about that. They're both pretty close. It's a fantastic upgrade. So we're looking at 42, 44% trigger pull reduction with the two shotguns that we've used. I'm excited to hear your results. Let us know what actual percentage reductions you guys got. Thank you, MCARBO Brotherhood, for your support. Thank you for watching, and as always, happy shooting.